Chapter 6. The Lawsuit Against Ackerman Labs. Tequila Watson pleaded guilty to the murder of Ramon Pumphrey and was given life imprisonment. Clay saw the story and felt a little guilty. He owed something to Tequila, but he wasn't sure what. There was no way of compensating his former client. He tried to tell himself that Tequila would probably have spent the rest of his life in prison anyway, with or without Tarvan, but this didn't make Clay feel any better. The truth was, he had taken the cash and buried the truth. At that moment, Miss Glick rang his office with a message that soon made Clay forget his guilty feelings over Tequila Watson. Patton French, the most successful tort lawyer in the country, wanted to talk to him. Later that day, Clay was on board Patton French's private jet at Reagan National Airport. Clay was extremely impressed. The inside of the jet was more like a five-star hotel. French shook Clay's hand and invited him to sit as the plane took off for New York.
"I was thinking about suing Ackerman 2 months ago," French informed him, "but you did it first. However, I think we can do business together. There's a lot of money out there."
Then, noticing Clay's undisguised admiration for the inside of the plane, he said,
"Do you have a jet yet?"
"No," Clay replied, feeling suddenly inadequate.
"It won't be long, son. A top lawyer can't live without his own jet."
After congratulating Clay again on his lawsuit against Styloft, French made him an offer.
"Soon I'll have as many Styloft cases as you. Now that you've opened the door, there will be hundreds of lawyers chasing these cases. You and I can control the litigation if we move your lawsuit from D.C. to my home territory in Mississippi. If we join your cases with mine in one enormous class action, Ackerman Labs will be frightened beyond all imagination."
Clay's head was spinning with doubts and questions. "I'm listening," he said quietly.
"You keep your cases, I'll keep mine. As more cases come in, we'll form a plaintiff's guidance committee. I'll be the chairman. You'll be on the committee because you filed your lawsuit first. We'll keep the Styloft litigation organized. I've done it dozens of times. The committee gives us control. We'll start discussing things with Ackerman very soon. I know they're lawyers. If your inside information is as strong as you say, we'll push hard for an early settlement."
"How early?"
"That depends on several things. How many cases are really out there? How quickly can we sign them up? How many other lawyers file lawsuits? And very important, how severe is the damage to our clients?"
"Not very severe. Very few of the tumors are dangerous." French thought for a moment, then said,
"That's good. It's better for our clients because they're not as sick as they could be, and better for us because the settlements will come faster. The important thing is for us to get as many cases as we can. The more cases we get, the more control we have over the class action. More cases, more fees."
"I understand," Clay said. After further discussions with French in New York about the financial details of the lawsuit, French was going to provide another $1 million for medical tests. Clay was going to double his spending on advertising. Both agreed that they would take 40% of the final settlement, plus expenses. Clay telephoned Max Pace for his advice. Max was enthusiastic.
"Do it," he said, "and read the New York Times tomorrow morning. There's a big story about Styloft. The first medical report has been published. Ackerman Labs won't be happy at all."
Clay met French for dinner in a top Manhattan restaurant, signed the contract that French had prepared, and agreed to let French file the class action against Ackerman Labs in Biloxi, Mississippi, the next day. The next morning, Clay got up early and read the news of the first medical reports on Diloft. Bladder tumors had been found in 6% of those who had used Diloft for more than a year. Some doctors had already decided to stop using the drug. Ackerman Labs offered a weak denial, blaming greedy trial lawyers for exaggerating the news. Ackerman's shares had fallen to $32.50. By the time Clay returned to his office later that day, Ackerman's shares were at $28. The first person he met in his office was Jonah. "We were here until midnight last night," Jonah said. "It's crazy." "It's going to get crazier," Clay replied. "We're doubling the TV ads. Hire some more paralegals." Jonah started to leave, but stopped at the door. "What is it?" Clay asked. "Do you know what you're doing? You're spending money faster than anyone can count it. What if something goes wrong?" "Are you worried?" "We're all a little worried, okay?" "I'll be honest with you," Clay said, sitting on the corner of his desk. "We're taking a huge gamble, and I've never done this kind of thing before. If we win, we make a lot of money. If we lose, we're still in business. We won't be rich, that's all." Patton French called late in the afternoon and reported that the class action against Ackerman Labs, which had been changed to include his Mississippi plaintiffs, had been filed in a state court in Biloxi. "I'll close the lawsuit here tomorrow," Clay said, hoping that he was doing the right thing. Ackerman Labs shares fell to $26.25. Clay, who, on Max Pace's advice, had sold his own Ackerman shares a few days earlier, before they had started to fall, would make a profit of $1,625,000 if he bought them back now. But he decided to wait. After news of the Biloxi lawsuit reached the papers, Ackerman's shares would be even cheaper. As more medical studies about Diloft were published, the government drugs agency finally ordered that the drug should be taken off the market. The threat of tumors had persuaded almost all Diloft users to contact a lawyer. Patton French had never seen a mass tort class action come together so beautifully. He succeeded in persuading other lawyers who were filing lawsuits against Ackerman Labs to join his lawsuit in Biloxi. In mid-August, French chaired a meeting of the Diloft Plaintiffs' Guidance Committee at his enormous ranch in Idaho. There, Clay met some of the richest lawyers in America, and they were all eager to meet him. They wanted to know how he had discovered the Diloft case, but he refused to tell them. French told everybody that he had had private meetings with Ackerman Labs lawyers, and they had told him that Ackerman wanted to settle quickly, otherwise the company wouldn't survive. All French's talk centered on how much money Ackerman were willing to pay, and how much all the lawyers would receive. He said nothing, Clay noticed, about the clients. In 60 days' time, there would be a settlement conference with Ackerman Labs. Diloft looked as if it would be the quickest settlement in mass tort history, and the lawyers could already smell the money. Clay's firm had hired 2 more lawyers and now had 10 paralegals, none of whom had more than 3 months' experience, except for Rodney. There were 3,320 new Diloft cases, each of which needed immediate attention. "They want someone to talk to," Jonah complained, "and we don't have enough people to talk to them. I'm afraid we'll be losing clients very soon." "How many more staff do we need?" Clay asked. "At least 10, Jonah said. "Maybe more later. And we also need to hire a doctor for a year, someone to organize the tests and medical evidence. And we need 1 full-time person producing and mailing a newsletter to clients who don't use the internet," Paulette added. "Get it done," Clay agreed. Paulette looked at Jonah with a worried look. Jonah put down his notebook and looked at Clay. "Clay, we're spending huge amounts of money," he said. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" "No, but I think so. Just trust me, okay? We're all going to make some serious money, but to do that, we have to spend some cash." "And you have the cash?" asked Paulette, who, like the others, knew nothing about the details of Clay's arrangement with Pat and French. "We do," Clay assured her. Max Pace wanted a late drink with Clay in a bar in Georgetown, not far from Clay's townhouse. Halfway through the first beer, Pace started talking about Dialoft and advised Clay to buy back the shares in Ackerman Labs that he had sold a few days earlier.
"Buy back as many shares as you can," he said, "and wait for their value to double."
At 10 a.m. the next morning, Clay bought back his Ackerman shares at $23, making a profit of $1.9 million. With this profit, he bought another 200,000 shares. He watched the market on the internet all morning, but there was no movement in the price of the shares. At 5 p.m., a company called Philo Products announced that it would buy the rest of Ackerman's shares. As he watched the news alone on the big screen in his conference room, Clay had many questions he wanted to ask. Was Philo Pace's secret client? Was it the company that had made Tarvan? Were the Dialoft cases just an excuse to weaken Ackerman Labs so that Philo could buy it at a low price? What would happen to Ackerman Labs in the case against Dialoft now? Pat and French told Clay on the phone not to worry.
"This is good news. If Philo buys Ackerman Labs, they'll settle the Dialoft cases quickly and quietly. Philo hates going to court."
That sounds like Tarvan, Clay thought. Rex Criddle, Clay's accountant, was worried.
"Your firm is 6 months old,"
he said, looking up from a pile of reports on his desk.
"But you're already spending $500,000 a month."
"You have to spend it to make it," Clay said, calmly drinking his coffee and enjoying his accountant's discomfort.
"But no money has come in for 3 months,"
Criddle complained. "It's been a good year."
"Oh yes, $15 million in fees makes a wonderful year, but the money's going fast. You used $14,000 last month on private jet travel."
"That reminds me," Clay said. "I'm thinking of buying a jet."
"You can't afford one."
"We'll soon have more money."
"I assume you're talking about the Dialoft cases? $4 million for advertising, $3,000 a month each for the Dialoft internet site and newsletter, all these new paralegals and lawyers."
"I'd prefer a Gulfstream." Clay wasn't interested in Criddle's anxieties. It's the finest jet in the world. It would cost about $45 million.
"You don't have $45 million.
"You're right. But maybe I'll rent one." Criddle shook his head with a sigh of disapproval.
"It's your money, I guess."
The meeting between the Dialoft Plaintiffs' Guidance Committee and Ackerman Labs took place in New York City, in the dance hall of an old hotel near Central Park. 1 week earlier, the government had approved of Philo Products' purchase of Ackerman, which meant that Clay had made another profit of $6 million. Pat and French did most of the talking. The Biloxi class action lawsuit had 36,700 plaintiffs. A group of lawyers in Georgia had another 5,200 clients and were threatening another class action, but French wasn't worried about them because they didn't have the important documents that he had. Clay listened, but was bored by all the figures. The only number that interested him was 5,380, which was his share of the Dialoft cases. He still had more than any single lawyer, although French himself was close with just over 5,000. After 3 hours of non-stop figures, everyone agreed on a 1-hour lunch break. After a couple of sandwiches and a glass of water, Clay went for a walk up Fifth Avenue, accompanied by Wes Salisbury, another member of the guidance committee. "I found out about another little mass tort that you might be interested in," Salisbury informed him. "I'm too busy." "I'm listening," Clay replied. "The company is in Reedsburg, Pennsylvania, and it makes the cement used by bricklayers in new home construction. It seems they're having problems with their cement. After about 3 years, it begins to break down, and when it does, the bricks start falling. It affects about 2,000 homes in the Baltimore area, and it's just beginning to get noticed." "What are the damages?" "It costs about $15,000 to fix each house." 33% of $15,000 multiplied by 2,000 equaled $10 million. Clay was getting quick with his figures. "The proof will be easy," Salisbury said. "The company knows it's made a mistake. Settlement shouldn't be a problem." "I'd like to look at it." "I'll send you the file, but don't tell anyone I told you." "Why are you telling me about it?" "It's my way of saying thank you for Dialoft. Of course, if you get the chance to return the favor someday, then it will be appreciated. That's how we tort lawyers work, Clay. We're all greedy and competitive, but a few of us try to help each other." Late in the afternoon, Ackerman Labs agreed to a minimum of $62,000 for each of the 40,000 Dialoft plaintiffs, and the money would be available immediately. "Not a bad day's work," French smiled at the end of the meeting, handing Clay a printed summary of his cases and anticipated fees. $106 million. As soon as he was alone, Clay called Paulette at his office in D.C. "You've just made $10 million, he told her. After talking to Jonah and Rodney, he sat on his bed for a long time, sad with the realization that he had no one else to talk to. He thought of Rebecca and decided to call her. She answered the phone after 3 rings. "It's Clay," he said, trying to sound casual. "Hello, stranger," she said politely. "How are you?" "Fine. Busy as always. I hear things are going well for you." "I can't complain. How's your job?" "I'm finishing in 6 more days. I'm getting married, you know." "Yes, I heard. When's the wedding?" "December 20th. "I haven't received an invitation." "I didn't send you one. I didn't think you'd want to come." "Probably not. Are you sure you want to get married?" "Let's talk about something else." "Don't do it, Rebecca. Don't marry him." The line went dead. Clay stretched out on the bed and stared at the ceiling, still hearing Rebecca's voice, hit hard with the realization of how much he still missed her. When Ted Worley received a thick envelope from the law offices of J. Clay Carter, he immediately opened it. He had seen various news reports about the Dialoft settlement and had been waiting to collect his money from Ackerman Labs. The letter began, "Dear Mr. Worley, congratulations. Your class action claim against Ackerman Labs has been settled in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Mississippi. Your portion of the settlement is $62,000. According to the contract signed by you with this firm, 28% of this settlement will go on attorney's fees. In addition, $1,400 will go on litigation expenses approved by the court. You will therefore receive, as a final settlement, a total of $43,240. Please sign the enclosed agreement and return it immediately in the enclosed envelope." $43,240? Was that all he would receive from that criminal pharmaceutical company that deliberately sold a drug that had caused 4 tumors to grow in his bladder? $43,240 for months of fear and anxiety about living or dying? $43,240 for the painful surgery to remove the 4 tumors and 3 days of lumps and blood in his urine? He called Clay's law firm 6 times and left 6 angry messages on the answer machine. Finally, one of Clay's lawyers called him back.
"This settlement is a joke," Mr. Worley said. $43,000 is criminal.
Your settlement is $62,000, Mr. Worley, the young attorney said.
I'm getting 43.
No, you're getting 62. You agreed to give 1/3 to your attorney, without whom you would be getting nothing. That figure has been reduced to 28% by the settlement. Most lawyers charge 45 or 50%.
Well, I'm not accepting it.
If the settlements were bigger, Ackerman Labs would go bankrupt, and that would leave you with even less.
I'm still not accepting the settlement.
You have no choice. Look at the contract for legal services, Mr. Worley, page 11, paragraph 8. You'll see that you gave this firm authority to settle for anything above $50,000.
I remember that, but I was told that that was a starting point. I was expecting much more.
Your settlement has already been approved by the court, sir. That's the way class actions work. If you don't sign the acceptance form, your portion will eventually go to someone else.
You're a lot of criminals, you know that? I don't know who's worse, the company that made the drug or the lawyers who are robbing me of a fair settlement.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
You're not sorry about anything. The newspapers say you're getting $100 million. Thieves!
Mr. Worley put down the phone angrily and threw the papers across his kitchen.